to ask him how he's going to vote. He has been consistent. He has been against that 6-week ban all the way back to the time it was signed into law.
Right.
But here's what he said, and I think it's really important for viewers to understand this. We can't conflate being opposed to a 6-week ban with being in favor of everything this ballot measure
All right.
proposed, which some
Big
legal scholars have
night
said would
tonight.
even, in certain cases, allow for abortion all the way up to the time of birth.
Right.
And he's against that as well. So conflating the Florida ballot measure
And Democrats have
with the
disputed that,
6-week ban
of course,
are two different.
Trump, you're a liar! The students set the world on fire! Trump,
Massive.
Trump, you're a liar!
Massive protests going on right now before the debate happens.
Trump, Trump, you're a liar! The students set the world on fire! Trump, Trump, you're a liar!
First of all, I think he has done an outstanding job of answering questions of where he lands on policy. From tough questions, from AI to crypto policy, all the way to consistency on the border wall to energy policy. So I think he's well prepared. I spoke to him late last week. I spoke to him this morning. I think that he
What
is
did he tell you?
Well, he's confident about where he is in it.
Vivek shooting the shit right now, getting his points in. We have an hour and 15 minutes, guys.
He doesn't follow anybody else's script. He doesn't show up with a bunch of pre-canned talking points. And I thought one of his best moments in that first debate against Joe Biden was actually towards the end of the debate. It got less attention, where he looked the camera in the eye and said, you know what? I don't have to be doing this. And I think it was true, and I think it landed because it came across as authentic. I think it was that he lived a good life, that he wouldn't be going through these prosecutions, but he's doing it not just because he wants to make America great again, but to make America greater than we've ever been.
Yeah.
And I want to see that side of him come through tonight. And if he does that, I think that he will win over voters who otherwise may have some questions.
Yeah.
If he allows the rest of this country to see the motivations that I know of him for why he's in this, for the betterment of the country, I think that'll be a win tonight.
Democrats have tried to pin Project 2025 on Republicans.
Yeah.
Former President Trump's out there saying Vice President Harris is a Marxist. It hasn't seemed to stick like it did in 2020 with the Democrats. Republicans were able successfully to put that label on some of the Democratic candidates, especially Joe Biden, in places like Florida. Why do you think he's having a tougher time putting that Marxist label on Kamala Harris?
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on here. The media has been very protective of Kamala Harris.
But I've even heard you say that you don't think she's a Marxist.
Well, I think personally Kamala Harris, I'll give you my perspective here, so I'm speaking for myself here. I believe she's just another cog in the system. The reality is President Biden, Kamala Harris, they're part of the managerial class that in many ways her policy deficits and Biden's cognitive deficits, those were not bugs, they were features for the managerial class that really controls them. So I think if Kamala Harris wants to prove that she really is a candidate with an ideology, I think in some ways it's to give her too much credit to say she's ideological. Bernie Sanders has an ideology, I disagree with it, but at least he's been clear about what that is. Kamala Harris tried to run to the left of Bernie Sanders on single-payer health care, on bans on fracking and offshore drilling, said she favored an end to the filibuster to ram through the Green New Deal. Those aren't her positions now. To me, that's an indicative of a deeper problem of somebody who's just operating in a machine. And I think a good message for President Trump to deliver tonight, I know he believes it and I think it's true, is that we're not just running against a candidate, the one we'll see on stage tonight, which is a different candidate than we saw on stage a few months ago. We're really running against a machine that frankly exists in some element in both parties. But that's part of why you're seeing many Democrats also defect to join the Trump campaign as well. This is bigger than Republicans versus
Democrats defecting to join the Trump
On
campaign.
November 5th, which will go down as
the
the most important day in the history of our country. Inflation will be gone. Our energy will be unleashed. Our economy will be set free. Our sovereignty will be restored. Our citizens will thrive. Growth will come roaring back. And America's future will be brighter than ever before. So I want to thank you all. This has been a lovely experience. It was years ago that I was here. We talked about what we were going to do.
Just need to point out, this is a past speech of his. This isn't the current debate. It's happening in an hour and 12 minutes.
Thank you.
We'll quickly turn to what's next for me. few possibilities widely speculated on from the
Is your
cabinet.
heart still towards the Senate?
Well, look, I think that there's a lot of ways to impact the country, be it through the cabinet, through the Senate, through the governorship in Ohio. That's going to be what we turn to after November.
All right. Vivek Ramaswamy, we thank you as always for talking to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Joining us now is someone who has shared a debate stage with Kamala Harris and will have a vastly different opinion than the man we just talked to. Julian Castro faced off with then Senator Kamala Harris in the 2020 primary debates. Before that, he served as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Obama, as well as the mayor of San Antonio, Texas. He's now an NBC News political.
Looks like they got a big crowd storming around the streets right now.
Pathway to citizenship for folks who have earned it. So she's done both of those things, and she's seen her numbers on immigration go up. I think tonight is going to be all about two things. First of all, articulating a strong vision for the future of the country. She has put that out over the last few weeks. She also has a great American dream, personal success story to tell the American people. And then secondly, she needs to remind people about why they didn't like Donald Trump in the first place, why he lost the 2020 election.
All right,
the
buddy.
good news is
okay.
The world currency, I think that would be the equivalent
Just
of
sitting
losing
there
a war.
sucking
That would make
Kamala
us a
off.
third world country, and we can't let it happen. So I use sanctions very powerfully against countries that deserve it, and then I take them off. Because look, you're losing Iran, you're losing Russia. China is out there trying to get their currency to be the dominant currency, as you know better than anybody. All of these things are happening. You're losing so many countries because there's so much conflict with all of these countries that you're going to lose that, and we can't lose that. So
There's a lot
I
of
wanna use
conflict with all these
sanctions
countries.
as little as
So many
possible.
different
One of the
countries.
things that we have with tariffs is that I'll say to them, you don't honor the dollar as your world currency. Is that right? You're not going to do it? No, we're not. I said, that's okay. I'm going to put tariffs all over your product. And they're going to say, sir, we'd love to honor the dollar as the world currency. You know, tariffs.
Just need to
in
point out
addition
this
to-
is a past speech. This isn't a current debate or the current debate that is going to take place in roughly an hour and 10 minutes.
Is political power for something like that, as an example. I stopped wars with the threat of tariffs. I stopped wars with two countries that mattered a lot. A lot of people would have been killed. And I threatened tariffs coming into the United States if they don't make peace. And we made a lot of, we didn't have conflicts like you have right now. We had very intelligent people. But the biggest threat you have is you lose that currency, and we have lost something that you'll never get back. And we can keep it if we're smart, but they use it too much, and then they just forget about it. And these countries like Russia, it's going out now and doing its own thing, and you know, they're going out bragging about how they don't need us anymore, et cetera, et cetera. The sad part about Russia is that Ukraine would have never happened if I was president, so we wouldn't really have to be talking about sanctions, but it did happen. And one of the things I'm going to do, a little bit relevant to your question, is if we win, I believe I can settle that war while I'm president-elect before I ever get into office. I can
Asking
get that war
themselves
settled.
as they watch
That war
live,
stopped.
waiting for the
This is a
defining moments
horrible,
that could shape their
horrible war.
decision.
Careful of these
And far
scam
more
channels,
people are
guys.
killed
Election news,
in
65,000
Ukraine.
people
Far
watching.
more people than you're
Fake
realizing.
subscribers,
They'll
bot
knock down
channel.
This massive building, amazing, the size of these buildings. They'll knock it down. They'll say nobody was injured. No, a lot of people were killed. The real numbers are far greater than what people are looking at. So I think it's a very important thing. Sanctions have to be used very judiciously, and you can win. We have things much more powerful, actually, than sanctions. We have trade, but we cannot lose our dollar standard. Very important. Thank you very much.
Great. Sander?
Thank you, Mr. President, for all the details on your economic
Thank you.
policy. As you alluded to, tariffs are the other side of sanctions. And given that China is our major trading partner with our largest
China.
imbalance and possibly our chief,
A lot of people say China's a crazy place.
how can we better institutionalize trade policy and national security policy to be coordinated?
So I had a great relationship with President Xi of China, really very close relationship. Now look, he likes China, I like us, so, but I don't want to sound foolish. He was my dear, dear friend.
China.
Tough guy, he's a fierce person. I say very smart. You know, when you say he's smart,
Oh, that's heartbreaking. We have lost the CNN news feed. Oh. Seem to have lost quite a few debate news feeds, actually. Hold on here.
fake news goes crazy. He said President Xi is
Oh,
smart.
we're back. There we go.
And I say, yeah, well, he controls 1.4 billion people with an iron fist. He's smart. But we had a very good relationship with China until COVID. And when that came in, it was a whole different ballgame.
She can do that and stay focused on what the voters want to know and hear instead of get caught up in Donald Trump's antics. I think that'll be a win.
Just over an hour until it begins, guys. This is going to be a massive night, and I'm going to be incredibly curious to what these individuals, Harris and Trump, have to say here on the stage tonight. Holy fuck. I have a strong feeling Trump is just going to steamroll her, but
she's a
we shall see.
Republican strategist and chair of the Metropolitan Republican Club. We thank you all for being here tonight. Shira, I'm going to start with you. You've covered Harris for a long time, going back to San Francisco. What's something that you're looking for tonight that maybe the rest of us who haven't covered her for, nearly a decade don't know?
Tonight, I'm really going to be looking for how does she get across her policy position? How does she help the American people know her, to connect with her? For a long time, she was sort of reticent to talk about her personal life, to talk about her family, to talk about her parents, but also her husband and her stepchildren. And so the more that she talks about herself, the more I'm always surprised. It's very, very new for her to be.
Is she a good debater? And I know you're an objective journalist, but I mean, how
She needs to not talk about herself. She needs to talk about policies, but she doesn't really have any, so it's a constant debate. Well, not a debate, but she runs around in circles trying to create these ideas and these word salads. It's fucking pathetic.
More so how she is as a candidate. How does she talk to voters? How does she talk on the campaign trail? What message, what does she appear? Is she confident in what she's saying? That's something that I'm hearing from a lot of
I've never seen her
current
confident in what she says. She looks like she's hammered all the time, too.
Voters don't understand who she is. You were talking about a few minutes ago. Voters don't feel like they know her.
Yeah.
This is the biggest opportunity that she has other than the DNC.
Don, I want to turn to you. Harris has had a weekend full of debate prep. Advisors have been trying to lower expectations.
She had a massive opportunity at the DNC, and it felt like she did absolutely nothing there the whole time.
Make it a show about her and the American people. That
I watched the RNC and the DNC.
Moderator. She's got to talk directly to the people to both, number one, introduce herself, because frankly, nobody knows that much about any vice president in American history, but also to talk about her vision under a Kamala Harris administration.
Went to the White House after winning in 2016. I sat with President Obama, which is a ritual. And
President Obama. They called him Obama.
He said, North Korea is the biggest problem. I don't think it's solvable. I said, have you tried calling him or talking to him? And
I'm going to have to
actually,
throw
the
up
answer
this
was yes.
cover.
He
You're going to
wasn't
have to hear my
responding to
annoying voice every
what
once
I
in a
did,
while.
and
Got to make the stream transformative, or it can possibly get taken down.
Little Rocket Man, I called him, and he called me things too.
Little Rocket Man.
He's got a red button on his desk.
I gave him a signed Elton John CD.
Button works, I said. And then it started getting a little nicer, and then one day I got a call that they'd like to meet, and it was a great thing. We had a great meeting. We had two meetings, actually two great meetings, summits, and we had no problem with them. Now they have a problem because they're not liking this administration. They don't respect this administration at all. So we have to get along. We have to get along. We can't have World War III. You're going to end up in World War III. Just like you should have never had Russia go in. It would have never happened if a competent person led us. It would have never happened. He led them into it. And I'm not blaming Biden. But you know what? What he was saying was exactly the wrong thing. I said, we're going to have an invasion because of a lot of the rhetoric. It was stupid rhetoric. But it would have never happened, not only for that reason. Oil was down low. You know, oil was almost at $100 a barrel. So Putin is one of the only people. I mean,
campaign trail. And it really, we have to hold her to account on all of her policy positions. And Donald Trump, I believe, will do that. While he's up against ABC News, I think he will come out strong because he is authentic.
Wow, somebody
Kamala,
on the NBC News network that is backing Trump. That is fucking wild.
ACLU 2019 report that she is far more progressive than what she claims to be now, especially given Bernie Sanders' words, which he said the quiet part out loud, that she's basically going to be doing whatever she can to win the election.
We were going to reduce nuclear capability substantially. All three of us. We're going to start it. We're going to reduce very substantially. And then we had the election, and after the election, they didn't talk about that or anything else, frankly. But we have to be very, very careful because the destructive capability of nuclear, when people talk about global warming, I say the ocean is going to go down 1/100th of an inch within the next 400 years. That's not our problem. Our problem is nuclear warming, and we better be smart.
Not nuclear warming, you mean nuclear winter if the bombs drop. Jesus Christ.
Putin came out today, he endorsed Kamala.
Kamala.
And I didn't know, was I supposed to call him up and say, thank you very much, I appreciate it. But he endorsed Kamala. I have a feeling, I don't know. I don't know.
If he actually endorsed Kamala, that's fucking hilarious. The constant Russia. Trump is in bed with Putin.
With the world, we can't have war because the destructive capability. You can be the head of the biggest bank wherever the hell Jamie is sitting. You can be the head of the biggest bank in the world and
with the biggest
a couple
loans.
of nukes, and your bank doesn't mean a thing. You gotta get along. This is such an important job. It's a dangerous job too.
It starts right now.
A
historic showdown.
They're acting like it's a UFC fight here or something. We got an hour until it begins. It is a big night, I'm not gonna lie, but holy shit, man. Calm down with the music.
Seen before. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
John Paulson behind me to your right, Mr. President.
Hi, John.
First, let me thank you for your presentation today.
That was RFK.
President Trump, in the last fiscal year, the fiscal deficit under the Biden administration was approximately $2 trillion.
So I just need to point out this is a past speech that he did. This isn't the current debate. The debate is happening within the hour.
Increased revenues from tariffs, as well as eliminating the tax incentives for the Green New Deal. These gains would be mitigated by decreases in revenues from policies such as no tax on tips. Overall, what do you estimate will be the impact of the fiscal deficit from your policies?
Well, we just hit record highs at numbers that nobody ever thought possible. You're right, it's over $2 trillion. Nobody thought that was a number that was, I mean, you could go back 4 years, nobody thought a number like that would be possible. It's crazy, it's like, it's just horrible, actually. But yeah, we're $2 trillion, and I view it as profit and loss to a certain extent. A lot of people say, oh, it's trade. You know, you have many people say trade deficits don't matter. I think they matter a lot. I think they matter a lot. We're going to have tremendous growth. What I'm talking about is all about growth. The tax is relatively minor compared to the growth. We're going to make our money back on growth. We're going to also, I mean, we're going to grow like nobody's ever grown before. I think if this all works out, you're going to have the auto industry come back to America. Right now, China is building 2 auto factories in Mexico, massive auto factories. And they think they're going to make their cars in Mexico and send them back into the United States with no tax. It's not going to happen. Under this administration, it's going to happen. And they wanted to do that during my administration. I said, if you do it, we're going to put a 200% tariff on every car, and you'll never be able to see it. There will never be one car coming across our border. And if I would have let them do it, we would have had these two factories. Well, now they're building massive factories, more than two, and they're going to kill Detroit. And the head of the union, the United Auto Workers in Detroit, has done a terrible, terrible job, just a terrible job. But we're going to bring tremendous growth back. And remember, we're also taking in a certain percentage. I won't name the percentage today, but it'll be a certain tariff percentage, which will be higher than people had heard in the past. And we will be bringing in billions and billions of dollars, which will directly reduce our deficits. Okay? Thank you very much. Good job you've done, by the way. Very good.
Thank you. And the final question, Resma, is to you.
Thank you. President Trump, you talked about how the increase in the price of food, gas, and rent is hurting families. But the real cost that's breaking families' backs and preventing women from participating in the workforce is childcare. Childcare is now more expensive than rent for working families and is costing the economy more than $122 billion a year, making it one of the most urgent economic issues that is facing our country. In fact, the cost of childcare is outpacing the cost of inflation, with the majority of American families of young children spending more than 20% of their income on childcare.
Because they say they want her to be able to interject, to fact check if needed. There's also an argument that, boy, having those mics muted.
I would say if you want good fact checking, go to Steven Crowder's stream. He will give you some good info there.
Think about optics, but also substance. Former President Trump, will he engage in personal attacks? His allies are urging him to stay focused on policy. For her part, Vice President Kamala Harris, for all the reasons that Hallie just mapped out, because so many people still say they want to know more about her. A lot of questions about how a Harris administration would differ from a Biden administration and some of those policy pivots that we saw from when she first ran for president back in 2019.
Well, as mentioned, this debate is taking place in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. It's being hosted by ABC News. We will simulcast it in its entirety. Tom Yamas is there in the so-called spin room where people gather and the surrogates
closing
gather.
remarks. Each candidate's microphone will only be turned on when it is their usual for them to want to coordinate all of these details.
Yeah, and Martha,
it's the details, indeed.
The details, and you've been at events. You've moderated general election debates. You, in fact, moderated that last amazing debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
The microphones were not muted, I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, they
I
shouldn't
always
be
tell
muted
people
now,
the first
too.
debate I did in 2012
Absolutely fucking ridiculous.
said it was like studying for college exams and then taking them in front of 70 million people. The debate with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was like studying for college exams and then taking it in front of a firing squad.
Alrighty, well, she's just gonna blab on about some random shit that nobody really cares about because Hillary Clinton is irrelevant.
Trump has changed the debate stage forever. He's changed the way these debates are done. He had that one debate in 2020 where he was really off the rails. I think he learned his lesson from that one, but you absolutely never know what Donald Trump is going to say, and our moderators are so prepared
He's
for tonight.
most likely going to cook Kamala tonight. He might not even say anything. He might just let her speak and dig a hole further and further.
Under indictment for trying to overturn
he's
the
obviously
last
gonna speak,
election. He has suggested he would not accept the results if he won here. We're here at the National Constitution Center. I'm sure we will be talking about the issues, but for the first time, you have a president who is talking about retribution against his enemies if he gets back in office. He has actually suggested military tribunals for his...
Alrighty.
Hard for him to know exactly what she'll defend and what she won't. His campaign's solution for that, they tell me, is basically to take whatever they think is the most liberal, the most out of the mainstream position that the vice president has ever taken in her career and argue that that's
this guy's
her,
microphone is awful.
regardless of what she says on the debate stage tonight. And Lester, I say that's the plan because, as always with Donald Trump, I think there is the plan and then there is what he decides to do on the fly on the debate stage here tonight, something none of his advisors can tell us for sure.
All right, Garrett Haig, thanks very much.
I believe we're joined now by Laura Trump, who's the co-chair of the former president's campaign. She, of course, is also his daughter-in-law. Ms. Trump, good morning. Good morning. Good evening. It's good to see you.
Who knows what time it is anymore?
I mean, yep, it's like a casino. There's no clocks. Old habits die hard. It's nice to have you with us tonight. Let's pick up where Garrett just left off. A lot of advisors, we're told, have said to your father-in-law, behave yourself, just play it straight. Don't be the truth social Donald Trump. Be the guy that looks presidential. Is that the advice that you've given him, and do you think he'll take it?
Well, he took it on June 27th in the debate against Joe Biden. And, you know, I think if anybody had any question, how can Donald Trump perform in a debate?
Joe Biden cooked himself there. He fucked up beyond repair. He stumbled, he mumbled, he called Trump his VP. It was a fucking embarrassment. Absolute embarrassment.
And how their lives are right now. And he has to make sure people are reminded that Kamala Harris has had the opportunity for nearly 4 years to do a whole host of different things. Many of them she's talked about in the past several weeks. And I think the major question is, why do you have to wait? Why aren't you doing these things now? And he has to kind of expose Kamala Harris, I think, for who she really is, because America, by and large, does not know a lot about her. She's only done, of course, one interview thus far. So I think he's going to be calm, cool, and collected. I think everybody's going to be very impressed tonight.
Laura, typically in these things, both sides will claim victory. But at the end of the day, internally, what is a home run for Donald Trump tonight?
Well, I think it's him having the opportunity to directly engage with the American people and truly call Kamala Harris out for some of her very radical past. You know, she has seemed to change her tune very recently on a lot of things. And it does beg the question, who is Kamala Harris and what is her plan for the future of this country? I think if he lays out what he did while he was president for 4 years and what he plans to do to rectify a lot of the damage that, quite frankly, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have caused in this country, I think that is a great success. And I think that we're going to see that happen tonight.
Well, you know, Nikki Haley, who, of course, was a rival of your father-in-law's in the primary, said
Also
that part of the reason...
John, Martha? No doubt. People know who Donald Trump is. Martha?
Okay, coming up, the opponents have been on the attack. Tonight, the candidates will...
I came back to this stream just to switch it up, but I feel like ABC is literally just a table of retards that just keeps stating the absolute obvious over and over again. So I'm just going to shut them off. We're going to continue with somebody else.
And they know what he says on Truth Social, and he knows the names that he calls, and he knows some of the innuendo that I couldn't even repeat here on air that he makes about his running his opponent here. So how does that play into your concerns about this election?
This
Well,
total
listen, I
economic
think Donald Trump is
catastrophe,
incredibly transparent,
the
and
borders
I believe that is something
Kamala
that the
Harris has now been slotted in by the Democrats to be reelected. She wants 4 more years to enforce a radical left agenda that poses a fundamental threat to the prosperity of every American family and America itself. And we're talking about
Yeah, Kamala is
America
not ready.
itself.
Holy fuck, man.
She wants to defund the police, have totally open borders, ban fracking in Pennsylvania and everywhere else, take away your private health insurance, and perhaps most pertinent to the very brilliant people in this room, raise your business and corporate...
It starts at 9 p.m. It's about, 48 minutes now?
capital gains. Most people don't even know what that means. What does it
47 minutes and 20 seconds to be exact.
She's been after all of this for years, and as everyone knows, she's a Marxist who destroyed almost single-handedly San Francisco, and when she was the AG, California itself, not the same place. People are leaving. They're fleeing like they are in New York. She'll seek out and she will try and get those things if she's elected, and she may very well succeed in getting them. She recently said her values have not changed, and these have really been her values for her entire career. Her values haven't changed. That's what she wants. So she told the truth. We're not going to let this happen. Communism is the past, freedom is the future, and it is time to send Comrade Kamala Harris back home to California, where crime is rampant and fleeing is the #1 occupation. I'm here today to lay out my plan to rescue our country from this nightmare and to bring back to its citizens the American dream, bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. 8 years ago, I came before you as a candidate for president and shared my vision to end
several days where Clinton provided Harris advice and guidance as the only other woman to do a debate like this, one-on-one with Donald Trump in the past. Among that advice, we're told specifically that Clinton told Harris that Trump may try to debate her during the course of the conversation, as we've witnessed in the past, and specifically said that if that happens, that she should turn it back on Donald Trump himself and try to provoke him directly. One thing to keep an eye on as we anticipate these two on stage a short time from now. We're told that Clinton and Harris have spoken several times over the course of the last several months since she became the Democratic nominee. We've also been hearing from those in and around the Harris preparations for this debate, telling us, among other things, that she had a series of mock debate sessions, many of them happening here in this state.
A series of mock debates. Oh my God, man. This is gonna be a fucking nightmare.
That she has watched some debate clips of Donald Trump in the past to prepare herself for what she may anticipate tonight. We're also hearing now from her husband. Of course, he is the second gentleman of the United States. Could he be the first gentleman if he wins? Well, if she wins, well, we heard from him in the form of a tweet a short time ago where he said in part, and I'll pull it up to read to you, Kamala, I can't wait for everyone to see you in action tonight. You've got this, and I've got you. Earlier in a separate post, he said that she is ready. He could tell it by looking into her eyes, and said that she can smell weakness and knows how to confront a coward.
God. She hasn't confronted or spoke to reporters for weeks now. She has headphones in all the time. She avoids any questions. Even if she gets asked questions, she just ignores them and walks away. When she goes 1-to-1 against Trump, it's gonna be a fucking slaughter. There is no way these mock debates that she has done will prepare her for this in any way, shape, or form.
So 60% of voters, nearly 60% in a recent poll, said they want to see change. Kamala Harris is the incumbent vice president. How do you make the argument that she's a change candidate when she's been in office for 3.5 years?
Job-killing regulations. In 4 years, we cut more than any president in the history of our country, by far. I'm proud to be president of modern history to achieve a net regulatory reduction.
What the fuck was that? Bro, CNN's live cutting the stream.
We cut more than 5.5 regulations.
Good thing. But she's also laid out her own economic plan. She sees that people are facing higher costs. She understands child care, unlike Donald Trump, who clearly doesn't have a clue about child care. Neither does J.D. Vance, who thinks that grandparents and uncles and aunts should look after children. She wants to reinstate the child care
Grandparents, uncles, and aunts looking after children would be better than students. Or, I mean, not students, teachers.
Tonight, she can lead with her path for a new way
or the government.
Forward and really bring a lot of people who have been disaffected, who really haven't voted the last few times. I think that she can excite them. History is going to be made this year, and North Carolina voted for Barack Obama in 2008. We're going to vote for Kamala Harris in 2024 and make history again.
Let me ask you.
Here are your white guys for Harris. That fucking guy right there.
Donald Trump has levied her away, calling it from the playbook of the past. Will she have to take on these things more directly in this debate setting tonight?
Well, it'll be interesting to see that in the middle of all of his word salads and lies, which we know are coming, whether he hurls insults at her while she's there in person. We'll see if he does. I suspect that she will brush them off pretty quickly and head into making sure she's putting meat on the bones of her policy, telling the country about the direction that she wants to take it, making sure that
Which she doesn't. She just talks about some random story about her childhood. She never talks about policies, never has.
Trump. She's going to distinguish herself from Donald Trump in a strong way. And I think those insults, whether they come or not on the stage, she'll go right past them and make sure she's sticking to the issues that the American people will care about.
You know, it's interesting you say that because today on debate day, the Harris campaign released an ad seeming to want to goad Donald Trump with a clip from the convention. Let me roll you a little portion of this.
Fucking, they are marching by the hundreds right now. Holy fuck, man.
Make people think, well, this is just more of the same.
Well, look, there are a lot of ads in this campaign, and a lot of them are about her policies and her backgrounds. Her background. She's not going to let this distract her. And she's not going to take any crap from Donald Trump on that stage today. She is a prosecutor, and she's going to make sure that she gets her points across. But she's not going to be distracted by the name calling. I think it is turning off America, and it may be one of the reasons why the Harris campaign chose to run such an ad, reminding people that this is really what Donald Trump is all about. It's all about him and his narcissism, and every decision that he makes comes back to whether it will advantage him or not. And when Kamala
Oh my goodness. Alright, that's enough of that. Getting wild over there in the streets of the United States. How is everybody doing tonight? It is debate night. We are currently 39 minutes out from it happening. Massive protests for Palestine. People marching, screaming through the streets. I don't know why they think that is going to stop anything, but they are allowed to do so. It is their right to do so. Still interesting all the less.
Threatening conditions expected along the Gulf Coast. Francine expected to make landfall tomorrow with the New Orleans metro area under a hurricane watch. Al Roker is tracking the storm. Al, what can we expect?
Hurricane watch? What the fuck is going on here? All right, we'll go back to this very briefly. I'm looking for anything else right now. Could throw back on the retarded table of ABC. I guess it's better than this. Actually, wait, they're not even up. They might be getting shut down. Isolated tornadoes. Oh shit.
Impacts. Baton Rouge could see 95-mile-per-hour wind gusts. These winds, we're looking at power outages, damage to homes, and with that wind, the dangers. This is where the most deadly effect is. The storm surge from central Louisiana to Grand Isle, about 10 feet of surge, 4 to 7 feet as you move further to the east.
A less globalized approach, and that he wants to promote investment. Harris is much more focused on the middle class, specifically parents and housing.
So as you talk to the experts and they look at both sets of policy proposals,
proposals. What do they say could be the biggest impacts of those proposals?
One of the proposals that multiple economists raised was Trump's plan for mass deportations of millions of undocumented migrants. J.D. Vance, his running mate, has said that that plan is their housing plan, that ultimately U.S. citizens are fighting for housing with U.S. migrants, and that deporting millions of migrants could make housing more affordable. We spoke to Michael Strain, who's an economist at the conservative American Enterprise Institute, and he said that that proposal would be detrimental to the economy.
What that would do would be to remove.
First time, it's coming up right after this.
All right, well, I am not promoting NBC. They can go fuck themselves, but it would appear we are coming down to the official roughly 30 minutes or so left until it begins.
Crazy what they've done. And they did that to help out other countries. It's now time for us to help out our country. In the words of a very great but highly underrated president, William McKinley, I am a tariff man standing on a tariff platform. And he said that throwing open our market without protection was, quote, it destroys the dignity and independence of American labor, diminishes its pay and employment, decreases its capacity to buy products of farm and commodities of the merchant. It will bring widespread discontent. It will revolutionize values. It will take away more than half of our earning capacity of brain and brawn. Worse than that, it will take away from the people of this country who work for a living, and a majority of them live by the sweat on their faces. It will take from their heart and from their home, and it'll take from their hope. Their final thing is their hope. It will be total self-destruction. This is the man that wanted tariffs. He wanted tariffs to be taken from foreign countries. And you listen to some of our stupid people and some of the very stupid people in Washington, D.C. We don't want to charge tariffs. That's not, it's going to increase inflation. China paid us hundreds of billions of dollars, and we had almost no inflation. This group that came in, they had the highest inflation in the history of our country. We took in billions and billions of dollars from foreign countries in the form of tariffs, and I hadn't even gotten started yet. We'll be a rich nation again. We'll be able to do what we want to do.
A lot of these big news network live streams are getting shut down right now. I just got an error on NBC and ABC.
Actually worse than our so-called enemies. But we have been treated so badly on trade and other things, on military. We protect them, and then they screw us on trade. We're not going to let it happen anymore. We're going to be a tariff nation. It's not going to be a cost to you. It's going to be a cost to another country. I heard Kamala the other day, Comrade Kamala, she said, oh, if you do that, he's raising your taxes. No, no, no. I'm not raising your taxes. I'm raising China. And all of these countries in Asia and all over the world, including the European Union, by the way, which is one of the most egregious. They don't take our cars, they don't take our farm product, and we have a $300 billion trade deficit with them. And they're going to have to pay a price now because we've been supporting them for a long time, and it's no longer sustainable. So I'm a tariff president. I'm not a tax increase president because we're going to lower your taxes. When I'm back in the White House, we will pass large tax cuts for workers and also no tax on tips. No tax on tips. I will fight for you and fight for the ability. We are going to protect Social Security. We are going to protect Medicare. And we're not going to have any cuts. We're not going to have age increases. She's going to have to, you know, a lot of these migrants that are coming in are going on to Social Security and Medicare. Your programs are going to be destroyed. You're not going to be able to get in your hospitals. You see the lines of people? You can no longer get in your hospitals. You feel sick. You want to go to your hospital. You have hundreds and even thousands of people.
Yeah, it starts in roughly half an hour. So we're just watching, jumping back and forth between different streams right now. A couple of the big news network streams are having issues, it looks like, but I think they're back up now.
Seniors with
I don't
your
really
inflation.
give a fuck if they go down, to be honest. They're a bunch of bucking bums.
Our seniors and their Social Security. We will terminate the Green New Scam and spend that money on roads, bridges, real infrastructure, and paying down debt, not fake infrastructure that has caused massive inflation and has been of no benefit to our country. And I will settle the war in Ukraine. I will end the chaos in the Middle East, and I will prevent World War III, and I'm the only one that can do it. I will prevent World War III. And if I don't win this election, Israel, with Comrade Kamala Harris at the helm of the United States, is doomed. Israel is doomed. That's a tough statement. Israel will be gone. 1 year, 2 years, Israel will no
with
longer
her husband
exist.
on a celebrity line, so I don't think that counts. But as far as I know, I never met her. I never touched her. I would have had no interest in meeting her in any way, shape, or form. There were two witnesses. One is a woman who's followed me for years.
E.T. now playing a cut Trump speech. Cutting in between.
With her commercial flight. And we became very intimate. I just sat down.
For everything in order to be dominant. And China is already building massive electricity producing plants. We haven't even thought about it. We will think about it, and I'll get it done on an emergency basis. So we'll be the leader in AI.
You also worked with them
every
to
other
oppose
form of
busing.
technology.
And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools.
Oh,
and
Joe, you looked so sleepy. He's a sleepy guy. A lot of people tell me. He's a very sleepy guy.
In another debate that cycle, accused of hypocrisy for shifting to a more progressive position about the size of his hands.
Look at those hands. Are they small hands? I guarantee you there's no problem.
These are old clips, man. Holy shit.
Hoping to make good on past pledges.
I'd wipe the floor.
Man, these news stations are just clinging to 2016, 2018, back when Trump was fucking just running his mouth like crazy.
You just saw, maybe mitigated by the rules we've been talking about at tonight's debate. Think about those mics muted when it's not each candidate's turn to speak. That may cut down on some of that overtalk or interruptions, if you will. There's also, of course, the rule that each candidate must stay behind their microphone. No stage wandering, a la 2016. Lester, Savannah?
All right. Thanks so much, Hallie. For more on what we can expect from both candidates tonight, let's bring in President Biden's former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and Donald Trump's former Deputy
How about no?
Today. Jen, let me start with you. I think it's fair to say a lot of Democrats were rattled by those latest New York Times Siena poll numbers. Is part of the vice president's mission and task tonight to reassure Democratic voters that all is well?
I think it's part of the mission, but the other part of the mission is to think about that 28% in that same poll of people who want more information about her. So what's tricky about this?
Out quite well. I will end the electric.
That's all they have been able to say about her. The same thing over and over again. We need to know more about her. She needs to tell us more about her. All she ever does during her speeches is speak about her past, herself, whatever. It is very rare that she speaks about actual policy.
As I've said, yet over the past 4 years, Kamala has added $6,300 a year in regulatory costs onto the backs of the typical American family. Think of that. To stop this onslaught and lower prices, I'm pledging today that in my second term, we will eliminate a minimum of 10 old regulations for every one new regulation. We'll be able to do that quite easily, actually. And instead of attacking industries of the future, we will embrace them, including making America the world capital for crypto and Bitcoin.
I don't know if I agree with that. Crypto and Bitcoin's kind of, I don't know about that one.
Elon Musk, who has given me his complete and total endorsement. That's nice, 'cause he's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. It's very, very much appreciated. I will create a government efficiency commission tasked with conducting a complete financial and performance audit of the entire federal government and making recommendations for drastic reforms. We need to do it. Can't go on the way we are now. And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force. Be interesting. If he has the time, that'd be a good one to do it, but he's agreed to do it. In 2022, fraud and improper payments alone cost taxpayers an estimated hundreds of billions of dollars. As the first order of business, this commission will develop an action plan to totally eliminate fraud and improper payments within 6 months. This will save trillions of dollars, trillions. It's massive. For the same service that you have right now, trillions of dollars is wasted and gone, and nobody knows where it went.
All right, this is a past speech of his. We are currently less than 30 minutes to the beginning of the debate. You guys are here right now. Shout out to you. It is coming down to the final 20 minutes.
Permanent. And to cut taxes even more, and we will have no tax on tips, something which they copied 4 weeks ago.
Policy debating candidates. So it requires a different muscle. And I think she's never practiced that muscle before. And that's the piece that I think is going to be challenging.
Respond. We've got a question for you.
Just quickly. It's interesting because you do want to look in the future. There's no doubt about that. The problem with Kamala Harris is every time she starts to say, I promise you I will, on day one I'm going to, Donald Trump can just say, but you're the sitting vice president right now.
Exactly.
Either you can't do those things or you won't. Either way, I don't think the American...
She is currently in power with Sleepy Joe. She's saying all these things, making all these claims, all these promises. You're in power right now. Just fucking do it.
He's always
Is that the worst thing that could happen to Kamala Harris?
If he is calm, cool, and collected, I'm not sure it's the worst thing, but I think she is going to hopefully not take the bait. I think the Clinton advice is good advice to her. Don't take the bait. Try to bait him a little bit. That would be a win for her.
All right, Hogan and Jen, thank you very much.
I wouldn't be taking any advice from Clinton. She literally lost to him.
Where this race stands, spoiler alert, it's very, very tight. And how tonight's debate could shake
more
things
than
up.
we did the previous year with a high rate. Think of that. So with a much lower rate, we took in more money because people were incentivized. Corporate tax revenues are 31% higher today than before my tax law was signed. With all of those cuts, 31% higher. To further support the revival of American manufacturing, my plan calls for expanded R&D tax credits, 100% bonus depreciation, expensing for new manufacturing investments, and a reduction in the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15% solely for companies that make their product in America.
Then Vice President Mike Pence, of course, you just saw Donald Trump on the debate stage there in Atlanta against Joe Biden. On June the 27th here. So, like I said, I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's keep bringing in our friends and reporters who know a lot about politics, and this is fun. We're going to do that right now with Fox 5 DC's Tom Fitzgerald. He joins me. Tom, good to see you. Happy debate night here.
Tom,
What's at
you're on a
stake, Tom?
shitty green screen.
Well, good evening, Andrew. Good to talk to you as well. I think everything's at stake here. If you had predicted 8 weeks ago we would be where we are tonight, I don't know if anybody would have believed it. But, after the cavalcade of news that took place after Joe Biden left the presidential race, after, dramatic Republican National Convention coming just days after an attempted assassination against former President Trump, and then, the ascension to Kamala Harris to the top of the Democratic ticket in that boisterous convention they had just last month in Chicago, I don't know that anybody would believe, the sequence of events politically that have rolled out over the last couple of months. So where we are tonight will really be kind of resetting this race for a lot of these swing voters, people who have still not made up their minds, and especially in these all crucial battleground states. Andrew, as you probably saw, our Morning Consult came out with a lot of polling today in a lot of these battlegrounds. Kamala Harris has maintained and built on the post-convention bounce that she had, but it's still very tight. It's still very close, and that suggests that there are some people that are going to be tuning in tonight, probably a lot of people tuning in tonight, looking to make a decision here as to whether or not they want to elevate Kamala Harris into the Oval Office, whether they want to return Donald Trump to the Oval Office or keep him out and go in a new direction.
Tom, that's such a good point. Harris has made up the Biden polling deficit since she became the nominee, and it is a jump ball. It's that close. It's practically tied with the margin of error here. Do you think, going forward, if Harris doesn't break through in the polling, say beyond the margin of error after moments like this, that Democrats may have, buyer's remorse about elevating Harris to this position, or is it just too early to tell?
I don't think they have buyer's remorse right now because look at where they were. Joe Biden.
At the same point in 2016 in our poll average, Trump was trailing Hillary Clinton by 4.5 points. Now it's only 2. So, yeah, Trump's behind, but this is closer than he's been in the polling in previous elections. And there's also this. Remember, in 2016, Trump lost the national popular vote to Clinton.
What's up, Drake Gordon? How's it going? If you guys are new to the stream, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. Currently watching NBC run their mouths like normal. I do not believe the polls are that close, but if that's what they're saying, then that's what they're saying.
Average here, the average of the major polls in those states right now. And you see the headline, obviously, these are very close margins. Look, Harris, 1/10 of 1 point in the North Carolina average right now. Trump by 0.5 point in Georgia. These are very, very close. Although you take a look and you see one here that's a little different. That's Wisconsin. Harris on average just over 4 points ahead right now. This was, keep in mind, Wisconsin, the source of the single biggest polling miss in 2020. It had Joe Biden well ahead, nearly 10 points on average. He won the state by less than 1 point. The polling here was way off in 2016 as well. There was a pretty big miss in Michigan, too. States with large blue-collar white populations where Trump has run up very big numbers. The polls didn't sufficiently capture that in 16 and 20. Is that going to be different in 2024, or is there more Trump support in some of these states than it appears in the polls? That's a major question to think about as you see more numbers come out. And then you just see in this column right here, the electoral votes. Again, 7 core battleground states. Where's tonight's debate?
Having a steep hill to climb because remember, the Republicans and the Democrats are kind of playing the same game here, but in different ways. Donald Trump has lost popular elections, and he has won the White House. The Democrats' goal is to do both, win the popular election and also win the Electoral College. So that's what's on the table here tonight.
Sure.
That's what both are trying to do.
So, Tom, that's so interesting, and you brought that up, and now I'm remembering, because for the Trump campaign in May and June and after the debate, they were seriously putting resources and they were talking about these states that normally aren't in play for Republicans that could have been in play at the time: Virginia, Minnesota, New Mexico, Colorado, New Hampshire. You don't hear that as much anymore. You really don't hear that at all anymore coming from, GOP operatives and posters here. But to your point about this summer that we have had, you're a student of history. I cannot wait to read the book about what happened in 2024, the summer of 2024 here, because it's fascinating about where we were in the spring to how we got here in the fall. And we don't have to dwell on that. I think our viewers know what has all transpired in the interim here. But when you want to talk about viral moments in a debate, and there are ones.
By the way, the owner of the restaurant. What's interesting, though, is you all cannot decide. And Lynn, you told us that you find Trump, your word, reprehensible. You really don't like the guy, but you find Harris, you said that you don't understand what she stands for. She needs to explain. What are you looking for tonight?
Holy fuck, man.
For me, the election is a decision between economics and morals. I like some of Trump's economic policies.
Yeah.
I abhor him, quite frankly.
Because of his morals.
Because of his morals or lack thereof. But she, I think, is talking a lot of fluff. She hasn't said anything substantive. I don't know that she has the experience or the
So I don't like one guy because he said something that made me upset, or somebody on the other side who has zero experience, doesn't know how to debate, or have any speeches, anything with the media. She runs away from the reporters when they try and ask her a question. Holy fuck, man. It's quite obvious who you should choose here.
Is no longer about policies. It's no longer about the real issues in this country, like the economics or the inflation.
You don't like the name calling.
The name calling, I mean, the back and forth. It's about who can get one over on the other, to the point that we are not pushing policies through just because the person that put it through was from another party.
And Andrew, let me ask you about your issues, because we were talking earlier. You like some of the things. You're really big on policies that Trump supports, and then you're also really big on policies that Harris supports. You don't know what you're going to do. So what do you need to hear tonight?
I feel left behind by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, Harris received 0 votes. I would have liked to have a say in the primary, and they didn't give me that. I feel that they think that they know what's best for me. Harris hasn't said anything. Harris's policies, a lot of them, have just been stolen from Trump. Taxes on tips, putting up the border wall. She's said absolutely nothing of her own with her own ideas. So I'm waiting to see anything from her that is an original idea and not stolen from the other candidate.
All right, guys, we're going to watch this debate together. And Savannah, Lester, we will certainly report back on sort of what the reactions are here in the room. It's an instant focus group.
Yeah, some important voices to hear. Kate, thanks very much. Let me bring in 2 experts at debate preparation.
No matter what you want to say about either man, Mike Pence and Donald Trump are 2 very different individuals, and we expect them to, debate very differently.
Yeah, of course, we know Pence is not even voting for Trump. How their relationship has changed in the last 4 years. Tom, I wanted to ask, too, because Harris ran for president once before. I covered her primary campaign back in late 2019. And she took positions then that she has moved away from now. Some then were quite progressive, far left. Many have described them on a whole host of issues here. And I will be looking for whether or not the moderators, get clarity on some of her policy positions now. Yes, the Harris-Walz campaign finally put out their policy plank on their campaign website over the weekend. And Fox caught up with some House Democrats just today and asked them about some of these flip-flops, we can call them. Jamie Raskin saying this to Hillary Vaughn of Fox Business: you can change your mind 1,000 times, and it would not even come close to J.D. Vance going from being a never-Trumper to a forever Trumper here. Maxine Waters saying, how do you compare that with the president who lies every day? Tom, I got to ask, flip-flopping, is that just a natural element of American politics now? Should we not even be questioning it anymore? Is this baked in for voters that if it's politically advantageous, electorally advantageous, candidates going to shift their position on something eventually?
Yeah. Look, there is a science to debating. If you go through how the strategy teams approach nights like this, there's a couple of different lines of attacks. One is refutation. You can just flat out disagree, with your opponent. Another is correction, maybe kind of putting in context something they said. Another one is calling out contradictions. This is, part and parcel how politics works. If you were in a political debate with somebody and you think that you've identified something that they've said at one point and now changed at another point, yes, you're going to go after that point. Now, there is an argument to be made of evolution of thought, clearly, that, do you want an individual who is locked into one position and stays there forever? One of the things some of the Harris folks have told me when I've asked them about this is they say, well, look, you're pointing out something of Kamala Harris when she was running for president in one of the earliest Democratic primary debates, and I'm thinking about the border situation, decriminalization and stuff like that. Traditionally, candidates tend to run to the margins of their party in the primary session and then move to the center if they are then become the nominee. Harris never got that far. Remember, she dropped out of that primary race early on. So in her positioning herself as a progressive in that race. And remember, there were other progressives in that race as well, too. You know, she said things back then that she's having to answer for now as a general election candidate in 2024 as the party nominee. So, you know, in some ways, you know, they're aware of this. They say they're prepared to deal with explaining this to the voters. But, you know, the same can be said of Donald Trump, too, especially on this issue of abortion right now.
Right.
He's having a time with his own Republicans about exactly, you know, where his position is. Is it moderating? Is it, you know,
well, he's made himself really clear that he wants to leave it up to the state. He said every state will decide on their own on that topic. He said it over and over and over again.
Attacks on Harris. He calls her Comrade Kamala. He has various nicknames.
Comrade
also
Kamala.
Coach Walls as well. We can get into some of that here. Because the Trump campaign had to make also their own switcheroo in their focus of their strategy.
I don't know if Kristen felt the same thing, but I think of David and Lindsay tonight. It's not an easy task.
Oh, it's definitely not. And when you talk about feeling lonely, part of that is because there's no one in your ear telling you or giving you editorial backup. Look, I think there's no greater weight than the moments before heading into a general election debate, because you are asking questions on behalf of the people who Kate was just interviewing, on behalf of the American people. So you want the questions to be understandable, digestible, not coming from Washington and politics, but from a place of people's dining room tables. And the best thing that you can say about a moderator is that you don't remember who moderated.
Well, I was going to say, and since it's over, I can say these can make a career, they can break a career, and a lot of times the criticism is quite harsh for a moderator who does fact check in real time. I can think of a moderator who got in trouble for that, and for moderators who don't. It's sort of darned if you do, darned if you don't.
I think the way to deal with that is to ask follow-up questions, make sure you're getting answers to the questions that you ask.
Well, we are 10 minutes, roughly 10 minutes away from the debate starting. Guys, it's about to happen. Will Kamala have anything to say, or will she just repeat Trump's talking points and make some bullshit up? The word salad with her is wild.
Space. We're also seeing, even as we've been on the air tonight, former President Trump already, his campaign, his team, kind of working the refs here already, preemptively going after the moderators. It's always a factor.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's not terribly recent, but I remember it's in the last 10, 15 years, it's become a lot more common to attack the moderator. I remember when you would never see the candidates go out and go after the moderator. I remember Newt Gingrich doing it in a Republican primary, I think in 2016 or something like that, and that was different.
Well, two things. You've got to feel the room, and it took me several minutes to feel the room, feel the temperature of the candidates. The other thing is, you know, having done a lot of debates, including a presidential debate, I swore a long time ago I would never publicly judge a debate moderator.
That's right.
It is an incredibly difficult job, and my hat's off to anyone who's done it.
Absolutely. And you try to tune out any criticism that you might be getting heading into the big night.
But you know exactly what their stomachs feel like.
I
10
sure
minutes
do.
away from the debate now.
I'm starting to feel those
I
butterflies.
know, having moments of feeling for them.
Thanks for all this. This was great. We'll take a break. We're less than 10 minutes away from the big moment as Kamala Harris and Donald Trump get ready to face off and meet for the first time
We get at
ever.
least three between the candidates. This is seemingly it here.
To answer your question, you know, I've moderated debates. I like having a crowd in the room. I think it gives a life.
Yeah, the crowd is
to the
good.
Room.
A crowd is a must. This is going to be such a boring debate. No crowd, microphone cut off. What the fuck, man?
Debate to proceed. But as long as it's within reason, I think that adds something to a debate. It adds something to the candidate's energy level.
Okay.
I think it gives people a feel of how the things that these candidates are saying are being received in the room. Remember, you know, when Lloyd Benson, and I'm going to date myself.
All right, we got to make it quick, Tom. We got to go soon.
Greg Patrick could probably go back further than me. But when Lloyd Benson looked at Dan Quayle and said, "You're no Jack Kennedy," there was an audible gasp in the room that nobody who watched that debate will ever forget. I think you learn something when you don't have people in the room.
All right, we'll look for those moments. Tom Fitzgerald, as always, can't thank you enough, and happy debate night. We'll see you.
All right.
All right, in the meantime, before we take our final commercial break of the hour, I just want to let you know that at least 10,000 of you have weighed in on this very question about which policy should the next president prioritize: the economy taking the cake, later followed by immigration, and then crime. So scan that QR code. We'll keep this question, this poll alive here. Speaking of polls, though, Tom and I were talking about how close it is between Harris and Trump. This is the Harvard-Harris poll out in the last few days. It's tied
Every
there.
poll, every news network has a different poll with a different percentage. Oh my fucking God. What a joke.
Harris down by 1 over Trump. And then, of course, the RCP poll average. This is an average of polls. There has Harris up over Trump just by 1 here. So let's take our final commercial break of the hour. Remember, we are moments away from the first presidential debate between Harris and Trump here. It will be simulcast on Live Now. Speaking of counter-programming, Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor, Harris's running mate, just took the stage there in Phoenix, Arizona. So we'll have that a little bit later
on what Joe Biden might or might not do in that first debate. And I think his
Oh,
performance
boy, Chris
in part
Christie.
reflected that.
Oh,
so the
shit.
question's going to be,
It's a large
is what
lad.
he's saying publicly what he really believes? We know that often with Donald Trump, that's performance. But I will tell you that in his 2016 prep, he was serious about getting ready for Hillary Clinton. In his 2020 debate prep, he was completely unserious about getting ready for Joe Biden. I think performances in both those debates reflected that approach.
All right, Chris Christie, you'll be watching with us. Martha?
And we have about 6 minutes left before the debate, so let's bring in Donna Brazil, formerly of the DNC, and Reince Priebus,
Yeah, how about
the
no?
RNC.
And guys, I will tell you something I've noticed that is different about this debate. Usually the spin room gets wild and crazy post-debate. What I'm seeing for the first time is pre-debate spin. You've seen surrogates on both sides sort of flank all the reporters, flank all the sets from all the different news organizations and try to get their message out. There was a ton of commotion about 10 minutes ago, and that's because RFK Jr. came into the spin room. Of course, he was the third-party candidate who has since endorsed former President Trump. He was followed by, I'd say dozens of reporters as he walked through the spin room. We're hearing kind of the same things. Both campaigns are disciplined. They are on message. The Harris surrogates are saying the same thing. Former President Trump is the most experienced presidential debater. This will be his 7th debate. And also they want to go over reproductive rights, that a vote for Trump is a vote that will limit abortion access. And then on the Trump side, of course, they're hammering the issue that Vice President Harris is untested. She's only done one big major interview. She's doing no town halls. And also they want to hammer home that they want to put the
Her
spotlight.
one major interview was recorded as well.
And the 2 wars overseas. What I'll be looking for, guys, tonight, who can truthfully answer the question that they are the change candidate coming out of this debate. Back to you.
All right, Tom, thanks very much. Our Washington correspondent, Yamiche Alcindor, has been covering the Harris campaign and joins us now. Yamiche, your thoughts tonight as we're just minutes away.
One of the biggest challenges for Vice President Harris, as I've been talking to a lot of sources that are familiar with her debate preparations, are how she's going to differentiate herself from President Biden. Former President Trump is going to try to make her own every single mistake that he believes President Biden made. And there's been a lot of tension among the Harris team about whether or not she should throw the President Biden, under the brush figuratively and say, I disagreed with some of the policies, maybe even the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the way that it was carried out, or whether she's going to say, I serve at the pleasure of the president and I agreed with everything that he did. But she has to, in some ways, really carve out what a Harris administration is going to look like and why it's not going to just be a third term of the Biden administration, or the second term of the Biden administration, rather. And the other thing that she's really going to have to do is not get pulled into personal attacks by former President Trump. They expect him to, at some point, maybe lose it. They're going to try to bait him a bit to try to lash out at her. But she really wants to remain calm because her biggest thing that she wants to do is really introduce herself to undecided voters and voters who might not be familiar with her background, her middle-class background, that she's a child of immigrants. They really want her team really make sure that she defines herself. So that's also a big challenge that I'll be watching for, how she does that. Back to you.
All right, everybody, we are 3 minutes away. 3 fucking minutes. It's about time. Long-awaited debate. First time Kamala and Trump will be meeting face to face.
his prep, but we are told by sources that over the last few days he has been hunkered down at Mar-a-Lago. He's been doing extensive policy sessions, and watch for him to do two things tonight, two things that his campaign wants him to do. Number one, tie Vice President Harris to President Biden, make her own what's going on with the economy, what's going on with immigration. And number two, remind voters some of the positions she took back in 2020 when she was running for president that were left of center. Try to paint her as simply too liberal for those moderate swing voters in places like the suburbs of Philadelphia. Of course, that is the plan. That is what the campaign wants. But it's all going to be about the execution in the moment, especially if Harris tries to bait the former president into an outburst. Savannah.
All right, Dasha, thank you.
Let's bring back Kristen Welker and Hallie Jackson. I want to talk about how the vice president has cast herself in this campaign as the prosecutor, going against Donald Trump. Are there limits to that in this format, do you think?
How does she feel about how Biden has done on the economy? How does she feel about the border? Then turn it over and let her talk.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us tonight, Donna and Reince. We're all staying tuned. Can't wait.
And I have to say, as we are just less than 2 minutes away, this is such an extraordinary moment, and especially, Rachel, when you consider that these two people that have been the center of our lives for the last 2 months have never met each other.
Have never even met each other. And Harris said, if you got something to say it to my face. The question tonight, does Donald Trump actually go there? He's questioned her racial identity. He's questioned her intelligence as well. Or does he stick to the issues?
Look, this is the largest audience they're likely going to have in this race.
Well,
it will be interesting.
Definitely got to question her intelligency if she's going to be running the country.
Punch hard. Can she do that while rising above the needling coming her way? But first and foremost, are we going to see a handshake when the two of them meet for the first time?
We didn't back in 2016 when I did that debate. We'll stand by to see that tonight.
But the first time, right, back in 2019, 2020, she has moved away from that on issues like, for example, mandated gun buybacks for automatic rifles, something that she no longer supports.
All right,
Fracking,
50
for example,
seconds.
something that she
It's coming
has
down to
changed
the
her
wire
position
now.
on as well. You look at Medicare for All, a position that she's backed away from. Watch for the former president to try to go after some of these issues. And I'll tell you, to bring it back to the voters, that panel with Kate Snow is super interesting. The economy came up again and again. And even though this summer, for the first time, inflation dipped below 3% for the first time since March of 2021, people don't feel great about it right now. So how does Vice President Harris address that moving forward?
And let me briefly go there and talk about his physical performance. It's been noted by many that the former president has tended to be more rambling, disjointed in many of his answers at a time that we were focusing on Joe Biden. Is that something that folks will be watching carefully?
He's now, of course, the older candidate now.
Okay, we will be back with you. It's the top of the hour now.
He
9
is,
o'clock
of
on
course,
the East Coast.
the older candidate now. I'm going to tell you something that everybody knows. Age is a difference, and it is a factor here. God, what a fucking dumb table. Some of the stupidest fucking people in the world.
As we've noted, this will be the first time these candidates have met in person, and it's happening on a debate stage. Also, the first debate since President Biden left the race over the summer and Harris became the Democratic nominee. A lot has happened in a very compressed period of time.
Yes, it has, and we have a few moments until the debate starts. We will join it. ABC News is broadcasting it, but we will simulcast it right here in its entirety. It's taking place at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia.
And
All right, well, get on with it. Get off the goddamn screen.
Phones will be muted while the other one is talking. Each candidate will get 2 minutes for answers. There will be closing statements, but no opening statements. So we expect them to probably mix it up rather early in this as they stake out their
We
positions.
want to welcome
We get a
viewers
sense
watching
overall.
on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications.
Look at the arena they're in. There's nothing. What a fucking shit show.
Here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Shit.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both.
God,
it's
that was
wonderful to have
fucking
you. It's an
awkward.
honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado.
Bro, just look at California.
They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings.
California's
They're going
a
in
shithole.
violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all, in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce.
This is all stuff you could have been doing for the past 4 years, Kamala.
Workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's an execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no
He
state
is
in this
fucking
country where
fired
it is
up.
legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states. And the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your
Well, I won't
desk?
have to, because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to
Trump,
respond, but I do
Trump
want to
knows
ask,
his
would
shit.
you
It
support
seems like
any
Kamala is just
restrictions on a
spewing
woman's right to an
the
abortion?
regular.
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing.
Okay, so every time she talks about shit like this, you just gotta remember, they've been in power for the last 4 years.
Leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand.
Any problem at hand they are talking about, they have been in power for the past 4 years.
Fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this
She's
is
laughing,
what's
but there's
happening in
literal
our country,
fucking video.
and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like
A woman
what I
was
say.
arrested
they
for
want to
eating
bring
a
our
house
country
cat.
back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase: make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well,
All
I've
this,
seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people were just killed, viciously and violently killed, and I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear, where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him.
It's so weird that they keep using that talking point that he hates the military.
Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies, like She was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute. I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out. She went out
Holy
in
shit.
Minnesota
Holy
and wanted to
fuck.
let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow
What's up,
fracking
JFT?
in
How's it
Pennsylvania.
going?
If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question
was
true. About you as
This
president.
video of her fucking fleeing the Capitol.
Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time.
We're going to do a live stream. We're going to go on an adventure. Kamala and I are going on a trip.
Up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
What's up, JFT? How's it going?
This next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I said that sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it. that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
So they wanted to call Trump out on that thing that the migrants were eating pets.
What did you do? Why'd you kill the cat? Smile for me. Smile with your teeth. Go like this. Did you eat that cat? Did you eat it? No, why'd you kill it? Did you guys see all this?
No, we pulled up and she was just laying there with him.
Did you see her eating it?
Eating it.
She was eating it?
Yeah, she was.
You call the Humane Society, see if they'll come pick this cat up. It's deceased.
Yeah, so there you go. The hosts are lying directly through their teeth. Not shocking at all. Not at all.
An icon. I'm really proud of everything I've done.
Rockets at people. There's several other things that have kind of come in about citizenship, about born alive bills, things like that have come in.
We'll go back to it. We'll do it as a post game roundup before we have Rob Schneider on the show. Look, this is important. This is obviously, like you said, 3-on-1, Nick. And like I told you, she's going to try and go campaign on the prosecutor versus the felon angle. She wasn't able to pivot away from that. You, Mug Club, made it happen this week with the DOJ story that, if you see this through the lens of this is all the weaponization of the DOJ, which they've now admitted, and we caught on camera, guess what? You now know, hey, this is a corrupt administration who want to weaponize. And by the way, they want to weaponize these 70 to 80,000 new IRS employees against you too, just to be clear. It's not about Donald Trump, it's about you. This is an administration who doesn't want any culpability. They don't want to face any accountability. Under Donald Trump, you saw no new major wars. You saw them both under Obama and under Biden. And of course, by Biden, you mean Kamala Harris by proxy. When she talks about people not being able to afford the homes, well, I don't know, 139% increase in average mortgage rates, a 30-year mortgage rate may suffice to sort of explain that. She is taking no accountability for her time in office. I hope to see Donald Trump meander a little bit less. He said some answers, actually, that kind of have surprised me, that have been pretty good, have actually been surprisingly effective, but I do hope that he stays on point because he doesn't have the luxury of being able to speak for so long, considering how they will give her more time. We're going to take a quick commercial break. You right now, Mug Club, us, going into the election.
Obviously, like Tom said, she's had how many weeks to practice and memorize all the talking points? I wouldn't be shocked if she knew ahead what the hell's been going on. He's debating 3 people right now. He's not debating one person. He's debating them. I hope the people.
Yes, we all know this.
Pat,
we
you
all
know
it.
What she's saying, the bloodbath, the this, the line, the January 6th, the people at home, they're not fact checking. Average Americans that are sitting there, not like us, the awake people, they're like, wow, he said this, he said that. I still don't think it's enough to get the average person to flip on Trump. I still think he's kicking butt.
Well, it's interesting to see that pretty much the entire line of questioning is all favoring Kamala, right? But I will give them credit.
It's
for
not
the one
shocking
point where
at all.
they asked her about
It's the
flip-flopping
mainstream
on some
media.
of her
It's
policies. At least they
ABC.
did that. But were you guys satisfied with that response? Personally, I don't feel unburdened by what has been. I don't know about the rest of you. I definitely don't feel like I'm burdened.
spot. In fact, they chased away people who wanted to run for the primary, and they cleared the field for Joe Biden. They knew he wasn't well. She lied to you and told you he was well, and that's how you hit him, because these people are going to be infuriated when they think about it. You know, we didn't actually vote for her. Why is she here? And that's the key point in all of this. And then
he let her
she
appear.
sat there.
He let her appear legitimate.
Yes.
He let her appear like it was. He should have been laughing in her face.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah, yeah. And that's what needs to happen right now. He needs to hit her where it hurts. You know, he's good because he's not doing the personal attacks. I think they're starting up again, but
So, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president?
Kamala is just smiling the entire time.
They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interests for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo.
That one
it was a
out,
very
buddy
good agreement.
boy.
The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, 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 and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country.
I want to move on.
Mr. President,
I want to move on.
President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something, I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up,
I
Lindsay.
want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
Thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's
you, Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to respond
No,
to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed
Holy
to repeal
shit.
and replace the
Just
Affordable
shut
Care
her
Act,
down.
also known as Obamacare.
usually the
You
other
have
way
failed
around.
to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have.
That wasn't
to
good
do
for him
that.
to say.
And you'll be hearing about it
That
in the
was
not
really
too distant
bad.
future.
Vice President Harris, in
don't have a plan.
2017, you supported
No
Bernie
plan at
Sanders'
all.
proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
pass as
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
It's unbelievable, but we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have,
by the way,
August, because they refuse.
This last August, native-born jobs, they lost 1.3 million, but they gained 635,000 foreign-born jobs.
Between him and his
well,
son,
she talks about this.
They get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
So I will tell you this. What's my opinion right now, and I know we'll go to a fact check. I'm sure you have some stuff in front of you, this is kind of tonight, I think, a wash. I don't think that it really makes a huge difference in moving the needle either way. I don't think he's done a great job. He's done enough.
I would agree. He said some pretty dumb things that did not make his case good.
They're showing Kanye West and Mike Myers right now on television.
Not the greatest performance.
This is, though, I will say, the theme of the night is, if you thought you had a media who cared about you, they do not. They are actually doing the bidding of one party.
Yeah.
And they are doing the bidding of one party at the cost of you, the American citizen. This is remarkable. We have seen media bias, but not quite to this extent before. The amount of teaming up and dogpiling and giving her extra time to answer and not calling her to the mat. I mean, the one that sticks out to me the most, of course, is where they asked him, would you support a federal ban on abortion? He said no, as definitively as he could. What if there was some kind of a possibility to veto or to overturn right now what we see as far as Roe v. and take it away from the states? Hold on a second. I haven't spoken with JD. They called him to the mat 3 times. With her, not one follow-up on any limitations on him.
What Donald Trump left us. I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. Well, I would love to.
Job in simply showing their face.
And I wish he would point that out.
Yeah.
I wish you would say, you've given me 2 or 3 follow-up questions. Who am I debating here? You can't point that out enough. I wish his handlers, or whoever prepares them, would tell him that.
Well, just think about what he's faced.
That's why I like Vivek. The first thing he would do is point out the media bias and wouldn't let it go.
Right.
People have to be reminded. First of all, it's an insult.
Hold on a second.
He has to embarrass.
There's a commercial on CNN right now. Yeah. Istanbul is the new cool. GoTurkey.com. Did you guys fucking hear the comments from Erdogan?
Wow.
No, what did he say?
Recently?
What did he say? Oh. I bought a duplex.
It's just crazy. Turkey.
If you could have the Brat Pack name not exist, would you?
I hated the Brat Pack. What a disaster.
Why
to see this?
Yes,
the clowns that are going to vote for Kamala are going to vote for her. Whatever. There are people in the middle that are going to see this and go, this is not fair. And this man who just got shot like a month ago and stood up and said fight is standing there and fighting. He's not complaining. He's not whining. He's not crying. He's a little defensive, which can be a fair criticism, but given the circumstances involved, he's crushing it.
I'm just saying that the non-answering of the Putin question that's pretty massive. Like
There's a few things Trump didn't answer well at all, and I think it's most of the time when you watch his rallies, he repeats the same talking points over and over again, which is what he is doing here. But there were a few things that he did not answer well in any way, shape, or form. It was pretty bad.
Back tonight, the time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
The other that is focused on the past and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Martha Raddatz. It was a lively debate from the economy to abortion to Afghanistan. They had it all, and it was historic, John Carl, fiery. Wow. Wow.
So I would say that I was a bit surprised with Kamala at first, but then she just kind of repeated the same things over and over again. And when you hear that she had meetings with the Clintons before this, it's a lot of the same talking points they did back in 2016. And they didn't win back then, so I don't see it happening again. But I guess we'll see in the next month and a half or 2 months. Crazy shit, I believe. Will there be another one? I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure if this is the first of many or if there will be more. But regardless, I will be covering the next one and the election itself. Thank you all for joining, and have a good night.